Hey guys, BJ the Brave here. Today we're going to be asking the question, can Shadowverse Worlds Beyond beat the TCG curse? Let's be honest guys, most TCGs are cursed. Yes, they launch with a bang, there's a wave of enthusiasm, and then a few years later, they're in the graveyard. Can Shadowverse Worlds Beyond break that cycle? Let's talk about it. Now, over the years, we've seen some incredible games go under. Some had brilliant mechanics like Duelist or Gwent, or the depth of something like an Artifact, but they still died. Why? Why is that? What is it about TCGs that makes them so cursed? Well, we know for a fact that many of the games struggle with broad subjects like poor monetization or bad matchmaking, potentially a lack of vision for the game, or just no long-term incentive for players to actually log in. Let's look at a few examples. Now, the Elder Scrolls Legend was a game that I absolutely love. It had the full weight of a beloved IP. Skyrim was absolutely humongous. It had solid mechanics, coming off the back of games like Hearthstone. And it also had beautiful presentation and good artwork. But the development was really inconsistent, and the content updates really slowed to a crawl. Eventually, Bethesda put that game on indefinite hold, and it was not due to poor gameplay. In fact, it's some of my favourite gameplay to date, but the lack of long-term vision and community support ultimately killed that game. Next up, we had Legends of the Runeterra. Legend of Runeterra was, first of all, backed by Riot, right? You know, you've got one of the biggest, people thought it just couldn't possibly fail, and yet, and on top of that, it was praised massively when it first arrived for its generosity, it was free-to-play friendly, and it had great strategic depth. It really took a lot of what worked well in Magic the Gathering and evolved and improved and innovated on that formula. Riot definitely gave that game a very strong start. We saw a lot of top streamers and top players flocking to it. But it never managed to maintain that broad player base. Its complexity and its pacing and its sort of lack of regular hype cycles really contributed to a slow bleed in the game. And the game is still actually technically alive today, but it has lost a lot of its momentum and viability. It's become more of a PvP and has a lot less financial backing. Next up, let's talk about Mythgard. Mythgard was an indie gem of a game. It really blended modern mechanics with old school tactical board elements. And again, for me, Mythgard was perhaps in terms of the raw gameplay, not my absolute favorite. But I tell you what, it was the very, very best when it came to quality of life in-game features. It was way ahead of its time. Things like being able to jump in and watch a friend's look at a friend's game history and watch a recording of the game and stuff like that. It was just really, really ahead of its time. And it had some very passionate fans and some, like I say, some smart design choices. But again, Mythgard couldn't maintain enough players to survive. The devs ultimately halted further development after not very long, and now it's no longer. Now, Artifact is a really infamous example of a TCG curse. It was actually designed by Richard Garfield and launched by Valve. I mean, it couldn't have had more sort of kudos going into the release date. And it actually had sky-high expectations. They were talking about ginormous tournaments. It had huge streamers that were really bigging it up, like Life Coach and players like that. But it failed pretty much on launch. I've never seen anything like it. And that was due to a really confusing economic model and a lack of casual accessibility, despite a planned rework which they were calling Artifact 2. Valve ultimately pulled the plug. Now, Gwent, which has been one of my, I've got a very special place in my heart for Gwent. It was from CD Projekt Red, who's the developer behind The Witcher 3, which is my favourite game of all time. And due to that strong connection, there was a huge wave of initial success in Gwent. There was fantastic art and unique gameplay. We had things like card animations, just unbelievable. And also in terms of the community, it attracted some very, very big names, and the tournament scene in Gwent was really incredible. They did things like hiring some spectacular venues in Poland to host these live events. It was really, really cool. But again, ultimately, even though Gwent lasted quite a while, it still ended up in the graveyard, and that was mainly due to quite a lot of overhauls, a sort of a regional focus. So there was always an issue about like NA versus EU, and they could never kind of get that to work. And it had very uneven updates as well. I always remember the December patch where it lost so many players, and ultimately it began to wear down its global player base and lost some of those key community content creators. Now, it does still live on in essentially a kind of community-driven format, so it hasn't completely died, but it's certainly not, it's a shadow of what it was when it first launched. Now, Shadowverse has already done quite a lot of things right. Okay, Cygames knows how to build a long living ecosystem. The Shadowverse OG went on for 9 years. What do we mean by a long living ecosystem? Well, it had rotations, it had regular expansions, it had a mobile phone first design, right? So that you could get those kind of that player base, people could play it casually, they could play it on the move, and that's a really solid foundation actually for longevity and for that long-term vision. But for Shadowverse Worlds Beyond to survive, it really needs 3 fundamental things in my opinion. Number 1, player retention systems, right? How are you going to retain players to maintain the initial wave of enthusiasm when they come in? You need things like to get the balance right between battle passes, cosmetics, engaging missions, and it needs to be not feel like a chore, and it needs to feel like you want to, you always want to chase that next thing. That's not an easy thing to balance. They've got to get that right if they want to retain the gamer base. Number 2, competitive integrity. You have to put the work into balancing your obviously your cards, but it's not just about the cards themselves, it's also about matchmaking. So many of these games have had issues, and I believe Shadowverse OG had issues with balanced matchmaking as well. You've got to make sure that when people are playing, particularly on ladder, they're going up against people with similar skill expressions and similar levels of card collection. There is nothing bigger that's going to make or break it for a player than if they get that wrong. And the third major make or break factor for me is the community energy, right? The thing with TCG games, it's always around the communities that kind of help blow up and create hype for the game. Do you have fan-made websites like Runeterra that had fantastic data available that were driving meta reports constantly? Gwent, I've already mentioned some of the fantastic community-run tournaments, and streamers that are regular content creators, events, memes, the whole thing, right? That community energy, the Discord, the back and forth, that's what keeps the thing alive. That's the sharing, that collaboration, that's what makes the game fun, enjoying the game with other people. So they've got to support the community energy, and they've got to get that right. Well, the great news is, guys, that in Cygames, we have got a really experienced developer now who have got 9 years worth of experience behind the helm of a CCG. And on top of that, the news is looking very, very promising indeed, as seen when they laid out a milestone to try and hit 300,000 pre-registrations. They upped that to 500,000, and they've just announced that they've smashed it with already 1 million pre-registrations, with still 2 weeks to go. So I'm very, very confident that we have got the key ingredients here to make this game a massive success. So what do you think? Is Worlds Beyond the exception to the CCG curse, or is it just the next name on the tombstone? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you made it all the way to the end, well done. Thank you so much for all your support. If you'd like to hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for much more Shadowverse Worlds Beyond content coming your way soon.